Yeah, we're live. We're green. We're all those things. Check my light here. Doing my tones, my earth tones. I like the bluish one better. There we go. So how's everybody doing? We are live. It's before 7 o'clock, so I'm doing well. I just posted a video today on difference in power gains from cylinder heads, camshafts, and intake manifolds on an LS. And that's interesting all by itself, but it's also cool when you think about it in terms of this applies to lots of other engine families. So with the LS, you guys have been here a lot. Certainly the live feed people have been here a lot. And so normally with an LS, the first thing that we recommend is, hey, you got to, put a camshaft in it. You're going to get the biggest gains. It already has more than adequate, bordering on good cylinder heads and intake manifolds, and especially in the case of an LS3, it already has really good cylinder heads and really good intake manifolds. Now there are better stuff from the aftermarket, but it already has really, really good stuff. Even the cathedral port stuff is good stuff, especially comparatively. So if you take a look at a regular small block Chevy, small block Ford to be another good example, if you take a look at any of those factory ones, that stuff is not that good, and so there's lots of room for improvement. But with the LS stuff, you have to kind of go out of your way to get something that's going to be a lot better than that. And we illustrated that, showing what a ported cylinder head can do in the right situation. And in this case, the situation is a stroker version. So it has more displacement, has more compression than stock. For doing a head swap, it already has a good size cam and it already has a good intake manifold on it. So how much is the head worth in this case? We got pretty good gains from the masthead in that case, especially compared to the old head that I didn't think that I had even tested, which is very, very cool. An 853 LS1 head, an early LS1 head. And I'm sure that I didn't do a back-to-back test on this. That rose to the 241, but the specs are identical for those heads. So I'm assuming that it would do exactly the same thing. But the cool thing is when you compare that to on a 408 or 416, 415 rather, the mast is a really good ported LS3 head. So we stepped way up, but we also had enough motor to take advantage of, not totally take advantage of what that masthead had to offer, but take advantage of some of what it had to offer, because that head flowed, I think 370 or 375 or something. So it had enough to support 750 horsepower instead of 650 horsepower. So we had a long way left to go if we had enough motor, but that's part of the deal, is you have to make sure that you have enough motor to take advantage of all the things that the cylinder head has to offer. Same thing with when we showed the camshaft. Now the camshaft was an extreme example because, and this is what would have happened had we tested this like on a Ford application. So on a Ford application, if we had tested the cylinder heads on a small block Ford application, the factory head is terrible. The only thing that would be worse than that is if we put a 221 head on it. But that head is terrible. And so it's really easy to make a really big jump up in cylinder head because we're starting off with something so bad. That was the case of the camshaft with the LS, because we started off with an LM7 camshaft, which is a 191, 190 duration. And we went to a 240 degree duration. And we did that on a motor that already had everything else. It had airflow research heads. It had a fast manifold. It had, in this case, it had a 408 cubic inch displacement. It had more than 10-to-1 compression. So it had long tube headers. It had all the things that it needed to really take advantage of the camshaft. And we put the tiniest factory cam available. We could have put something, I guess, even smaller had we done a custom one, a 180 or a 170 or a 160 camshaft. And then we essentially put the right camshaft in there. So we went from 190 to 240, a 50-degree duration change in camshaft, and with somewhat predictable results. It was really exciting to do that test, because where else do you get 175 horsepower from a camshaft? And that's measured peak to peak. It was actually higher than that at the very top of the RPM range, where the factory cam obviously was just falling off, just kind of falling on its face. So that's the thing. And I brought this up a number of times because when we're testing something, guys are like, oh, 175 horsepower. When I first did that test long ago, when I first brought that story out, everyone's like, there's no way that that's even possible. I'm like, I didn't invent the camshaft. I mean, I didn't spec it out. I didn't have it custom ground. It isn't a Super Richie Magic cam. It's just a cam. It happened to be on the shelf from the guys from Crane supplied us. This is just a shelf cam. There's nothing magic about it. But think about the situation. You know, we could do the same thing with cylinder heads. If we took an old Winston Cup motor that has a Yates head on it that's making 850 horsepower, and then we saddle it with a 5-liter Ford head that flows 160 CFM, we're going to lose 300 or 400 horsepower. So does that mean a head change is worth that? Same thing with the, you know, if you take it to the extremes, you look at a Pro Stock motor or a top fuel motor. If we put a 5-liter Ford head on a top fuel motor, we're going to lose 8,000 horsepower. Does that mean the head is worth 8,000 horsepower? Yes, it is. But again, it all depends on what we're using as our test regimen. Like, what is our before thing? What is our after thing? And we saw a little bit out in the cam thing. We saw a really, really tiny camshaft, a mild camshaft designed for a 4.8 and a 5.3, and then the right camshaft on a 408 that already had everything else going for it. Heck, even the 206 cam that we tried in there gained a lot of power, and the 224 cam, a lot of power, and then the 240 cam, a lot of power. When you tried a 246 cam after that, and it didn't gain a lot of power. So the final thing was the intake manifold. We tested the fast intake manifold versus I think that was an LS1 manifold, but we could have gone even more extreme on that. We could have showed even bigger gains on the intake manifold, because I think that one was about 50 horsepower. But had we done that test with because I'm thinking that this was done maybe before somebody let me know what year the LS4 came out. This may have been done before the LS4 was there. It was certainly done before I knew about how bad the LS4 intake manifold was. But if we would have substituted the factory LS4 intake manifold for the LS1 intake manifold, which at the time was the worst one that I knew about, but had we done the LS4, we could have lost another 20 or 30 or more horsepower, probably compared to the LS1, I'm certain. And so the spread would have been much bigger. So the gain that we got from the fast manifold versus an LS4 on a 408-inch motor or 415-inch motor, some kind of stroker deal. In this case, it was done on a 6-liter. But it could have been even greater had we tested it on something bigger and more powerful. So again, what are we starting with and what are we ending with to dictate this thing? And because this is YouTube, you know, you got to go big. It's got to be a huge number, like 175 horsepower cam. So people will go, oh, there's no way. And then they read it and they go, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. At least some of them say that. Some of them say, oh, that's just BS. There's no way that happened. I'm like, look, you're wanting that to be the case. You're wanting that not to be a thing, but just use logic. Do the middle ground part of it. Think about the logic part of it, not this side, not this side. Think about this side, the middle part. It is possible. And not only is it possible, once you realize what's going on, you're like, that's actually more likely than not that's actually going to happen. And so when I'm doing this video, we're creating a situation. Well, which one of those do you want to use more? You know, which one gains more power? In the case of an LS, the camshaft is the way to go. If you're doing something especially for the first time on your combination, you want to do a camshaft in an LS. On a 5-liter, that's not the same thing. I've done camshafts, and in a lot of other applications, small block Chevy, small block Fords, probably small block Dodges too, where we are limited in head flow, the gain that you get from the thing that you're testing is also going to be, you're going to have to consider what order am I putting these things in. If I do the camshaft first and then the head's going to look better. If I do the head first and then the camshaft's going to look better because you've given it something else that it wanted. Whatever you're going to restrict it with, if you're going to restrict it with something, it's not going to show as well. If it has the other things like in the LS and the 408 or 415 or even the 6-liter, if it has all the things that it needs and you give it that final thing, you're going to look like you look like a hero, like I did, the Mr. 175 horsepower camshaft. Now I want the specs on the cam. I'm like, it's just a shelf cam. It's not a magic one. But that's the thing. So what order you test it in, like a small block Ford, I put the 274 cam in with a stock head. It did pretty good. It gained like 30 horsepower, whatever. But the gain would be much bigger had we done something on a airflow research headed small block or a trick flow headed small block or a dart headed small block or whatever, something else that had good heads on it. Had we done that first, then the camshaft would have showed a lot more. Or vice versa, like with the small block Ford test, where I did all the heads, we had an intake manifold, we had a dual plane, we had a camshaft in the 274 or something like that, where we tested the heads. And then all of a sudden the heads could be worth like pretty easily 100 horsepower. We saw that on a factory head versus like an Airflow Research 165 or 185, with having them be worth that kind of power. And then it gets even more ridiculous or beneficial, depending on your point of view, if we continue to use the stock 5-liter head. And like we did in the comparison with the 392, we go from a stock head up to something that's good on a stroker motor that has a good sized camshaft in it, a good intake manifold, and all it needed was a cylinder head. Then all of a sudden, it could be way more than 100 horsepower. It could be 150 horsepower. But again, it's just a situational thing. So I'm going to get a poll going here. And then the other question that I didn't cover in that video is, if you're thinking about doing this, obviously a camshaft is the thing that we recommend for the LS motor. Camshaft and springs, that's the way to go. The other things are can be beneficial, but again, you have to decide, what is my ultimate goal here? Where am I going? If I'm building an all motor thing, then yeah, you should go with ported heads because they're going to help. You should go with an intake manifold. If you're just going boost, just cross those other two things off the list and just put your turbo on and go out with your cam and go out and enjoy life. Would you spend, like, I think it's probably about $1,200 by the time you're said and done. Would you spend $1,200 for a fast LSXR intake if you got an extra 40 horsepower? So if the intake manifold was worth 40 horsepower and cost $1,200, would you do that? So let me know. See what you guys got going on. I'm scrolling back, scrolling. Mod motor power. We did one of those just recently, right? Why not all three? And that was the thing. In these cases, in the testing in this video, each of the motors already had the other things that they needed. We just gave them the last thing. So essentially, they got all three of them. Oh, Admiral, you just watched the mod motor video? See? I told you I'd do mods. What mod do you recommend for a C6 Z06? Well, the first thing I do is a camshaft. Cam adds the most power by far. The rest are supporting. Richard, you claim to use the right cam. What did I use the right cam in? Oh, in the 408? It did kind of turn out to be the right cam. Although I did have, so we could say there was the wrong cam, because I did have somebody correct me. I had somebody in the comments tell me that had I used the right cam, I would have gotten a lot more power. So we could just go on that. We can go on his assumption that it was the wrong cam. Can't imagine how much it cost to build a 495. That 495 was probably very, very expensive. What kind of power from heads, cam, and intake on the Z06? Well, what year is your Z06? It's a C6 Z06. So is that that's an LS7, right? You don't really need ported heads on that. I would just put a cam in it. Although I think the factory heads are having some problems though. This guy on the interwebs keeps telling me to put a cam on my motor, so I guess I'll put all of it in it. You should ask him if he has a cam in his truck, because well, he does have a cam in his truck, but it's very, very stock. What happened to the Magnum 360 turbo? That's still in route. I watched an older 400 horsepower video, and a much more aggressive cam is needed for an all-engine 4.8 liter. So we have stuff that's gone near 500 with that, with a 4.8. and it didn't take too much camshaft, but there's room for more cam. Stock bottom end, LQ9, stock 706 heads, truck Norris cam, Trailblazer SS engine 7/8 headers. What's it likely to do in a lifted Silverado? I think it sounds like you're going to have fun driving it. The compression is going to be really high on a LQ flat top LQ9 with 706 heads on it, though. So I'm a little worried about the detonation on that. How to rebuild an LS AutoZone book? Will it work? Are you asking if the book will work? I've never seen one at AutoZone. And I was actually just over there today. I had to work on my son's Honda. We had the air intake hose between the air box and the throttle body was it's a corrugated one, and it had a tear in the corrugation, so we had to fix that. Richard, been watching your videos for years. Thank you for your support. James, what's up? I think it's time to set up members-only content and charge $5 a month for the excellent tech information. I can do the Patreon thing, and that could be one of the benefits of the Patreon deal. That's something to think about. Trophy 4 cam lobe size is very small from the factory. They're better now. Let's see. LQ9. Were you asking how much power the thing was going to make? In a lifted Silverado? I don't know. The lifted Silverado is not going to affect the power unless you have really heavy. If you're asking what the wheel horsepower is, I don't know. It's going to be very heavy. I don't know what your wheels and tires and transmission and all that stuff is. But I have something similar to that I've run before. Scrolling. Okay, there's a torque cam. There's a stage 1 truck cam. Yeah, I think somebody said, I think that they're probably pretty close. Did somebody say it's going to be like 450? 400? Oh, okay. 450, yeah, that's probably about right. 450 at the flywheel, though, not at the wheels. LS4 was 2005. Okay, so that was, I think I did that test in 2010, so I was behind the curve. Live chats every night, almost a video per day. Let's members see a video a day or two ahead of the free members. I think this will make up for the non-subscribers and the non-likers. We like them too. They're people too. Build a Magnum 360 turbo. My goal is 700 horsepower. Can I do it with stock heads? Yes, you can. It just takes more boost when you do that. It's going to take a camshaft. Are you running the stock intake manifold too? The stock kegger intake manifold? It's going to be kind of limiting. You'd make a lot more power with an intake manifold on there. So let's see. 360 Magnum intake test. So test description, that is with a cam. It's a 212 218 and it only made 337 horsepower and 414 foot-pounds. And then what happened when we put the intake manifold on there? $360 horsepower, 360 times 2. Yeah, you could get there. It'd be better, like I said, if you had a different intake manifold rather than the kegger. But you can make 700 flywheel, but it's going to be, the boost is going to be 14 pounds or something. Richard, can you describe the fundamental factors in low end power and torque? Is it just displacement? There are a number of things that help make low speed power. One of them is displacement. One of them, and displacement or boost are going to be the two biggest things. So the next thing, the other things that help with that, intake runner length. The longer runners help promote low speed power. Long tube headers help that. Obviously, I'm assuming that the tune is optimum. Compression helps that. Some guys will tell you that port volume and things like that, I haven't seen that, or at least I haven't seen it make a significant difference. And also camshaft. So if you're talking about low speed power at like 2,500 RPM, you have to do a lot to camshaft to come into play down there. The variable cam seems to help. For my LR4 to make 400 plus horsepower, any larger cam than a Truck North or a Chupacabra? Yes, you do. No, you don't. Not more than even a 4.8 would make 400 with a Truck North or a Chupacabra, because the 5.3 made 425, I think. Truck Norris, yeah, made 425. Yeah, 424. So yeah, so I think a 4.8 would be right around 400. It's the best carb for a 292 inline 6-cylinder. Do you have a manifold that will accept a different carb than the 1 barrel that came on it? Or did it come with a 2 barrel or something? Do you have a Clifford or something else that's on there? The LS4 needs more intake manifold. And it has good heads on it, though. Are AFR 185s with 202s, 16s too big for a truck application that tows? No. Intergalactic kegger. Man in Black. Scrolling back, scrolling back, scrolling back, scrolling back. I'm still going back. Come on. 2009 Z06 have issues with valve seizing. Okay, on the that's an LS7, right? 2009 Z06 4.8. I watched an older 400 horsepower video. LSXR intake would be worth it only. Naturally aspirated racing. Few LSX guys race naturally aspirated. And actually, if you were racing, that's probably not the intake I would pick for racing. I'm thinking about like street strip kind of things where the guys do mostly driving and are care about the power production up to 7,000, let's say. Dan, what's up, man? Bart's been very, very good to you lately. Is that like Chico Squela? LS4 is more NA horsepower than a 4.8. It does. It's a 5.3, right? Is the throttle body spacer worth it on a 4.8? No. New Zealand's in the house. 400 wheel horsepower is hard to get from a 5.3. One of the other 4 workers made 500 grand last year. Dude, he must have put in some OT, right? I'm hoping. Otherwise, I need to come work for you. $799 heads work good on an LQ4. Yeah, $799 is a little bit bigger than a 706. Not a lot, but a few cc's. Need to get you out shooting more videos with actual cars. Yeah, probably not cars so much. Engines, more engines. Dan, how can I have you blocked if you're here? And why would I block you? 402 big block Chevy with a low cam is 34 degrees advanced, reasonable at idle. Does it have vacuum advance on it? Seems like a lot of idle advance. So my brother's car, he did heads cam and intake, got heads from Texas Speed. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, man. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that it didn't go well. G-Body 81 factory diesel Regal LQ9 $799 heads. Those are good. Okay, 13. Yeah, let us know if we can help. What do you think about a high compression engine with a cam that can be timed to lower and raise the dynamic compression, do something streetable, but dialed up for a track use with high octane? So how are you going to vary the cam? The best way to do that is to have VTEC, like a Honda does. That way you can have multiple cams. That way you just drive around on a mild cam profile and then have the camshaft that you want to have when you have higher engine speeds. Like to do a Brian Toohey stage 1 truck cam at 5.3. However, I can't do a high flowing intake or exhaust headers where I see the typical gains of 40 horsepower with an OE intake and exhaust. Yeah, if this is a truck 5.3 and you have a truck intake manifold on it, you'll see that. Tim, you're looking for a used trick flow box arb? I haven't seen any of those in a long time. Doing a 480 in a G-body with an LQ4, 823 heads. The rec port heads, factory rec port heads, are a good choice on the 6-liter. One of the lifters isn't springing. Is it staying pushed down or something? There just aren't many options for Magnum. I agree. I think that I would do I want to try it with a kegger too. I want to try boost with that. We know what it's going to do. I mean, this thing made peak power at like the truck Norris County. I have my other stuff up now. It's really, really low because it's a really long runner intake manifold. So it's going to do that with boost. It's going to be basically going to be the equivalent of boosting a TunePort Chevy. It's going to be like that. So that's not going to be optimum for making lots of, a big power number. It's going to be good for making a big torque number. So explain to me what you mean by not springing back. Is the plunger stuck down inside the lifter? What's going on? .53 the stage 3 BTR, 2800 stall, 3200 long tube header, 373 gears, posi. So that's all sounding good. Or we lost prime. Yeah, we've had plungers stick at the bottom, and then once we get enough oil flow to it, it comes back up, and after it comes up, then it's good. Richard, do you plan to do a big NA power 454 or 455? No, I don't think so. I would have to talk to the guys at TA Performance about that, or somebody else here that's done Buick stuff. I've never done any. I mean, I did the one that we have and ran the turbo on it, but not an NA thing. I missed the punching the tree, the bag, the tree house, Richard, using your face with knowledge. Let's see. I'm scrolling back because it looks like I missed a bunch of stuff again. Dan, I don't know what the difference between a TO and a four worker is. I'm not hip on all that lingo. Man, I missed a bunch of stuff here. Let's see. Here we go. Also went and checked the solenoid. Standard did have a small leak. Okay, you're fixing your thing there again. He hasn't done another guy's engine in quite some time. Since I tried to run the Dodge and the 4-cylinder Pontiac, and I did a Pontiac 350. That's the other guys. Can you have a head that flows too much? I mean, I guess if you took an extreme, if you had a head that flowed 1,000 CFM, that probably would be too much. Not usually in any sort of realistic range. Edward, you're welcome. I'll spend $1,200 for 40 horsepower on an intake swap, but I'm old school. People have paid more than for 40 horsepower gains from porting their intake that they already have. Yeah, if you have somebody port your intake manifold, you could easily spend that much. If the heads are too big, low end torque could suffer. I just spent $2,800 on ITBs. Those are cool though. So that, Dan, that was actually my point of the $1,200 for, and I should have put that in there, for the $1,200 on the intake manifold. At what point, like with intake manifold or head or whatever thing that you would be getting, what point do you just go, I'm just going to put a turbo in it? Because, you know, turbo stuff for LS is pretty inexpensive. Have you ever flowed stock LS3 heads? Yes. 315 CFM is what I got. I went from a mild cam to a moderate cam at a 350 that gave me 45 wheel horsepower. So this has been a pretty small cam to begin with, then, right? 67, all original GM monojet, no top end power bogs, down under, load, revs fine, in neutral. L7, what kind of power is my brother looking at with a cam? I'm thinking you could make 700 or 600, more than 600 at the flywheel with just a cam. Finally finished the wiring harness on my twin turbo build. It came out nice, but you have 200 hours in it. So you ended up making like $4 an hour or something. $40 degrees at idle with vacuum advance, 18 base. Okay, 18 seems more realistic, but yeah, I don't know how much swing you have on the vacuum advance. Peanut head, small dome, 8.2 to 1 compression. Does it like the idle there? I mean, a lot of times we set the idle by ear and start adjusting the carburetor. Try to find long tube headers for my 5.9 Magnum. I was wondering what cam and spring you use for your tests. I'm looking at the most cam without hitting a piston. I don't know about most cam because I haven't done any measurement at all. I can tell you the cam that we ran. I think it was a 212, 218 or somewhere thereabouts. Intake test. Here's our carburetor. It was a 264R-14, 360 Magnum cam, 480 lift, 212, 218, and a 114 LSA is what the thing says. Richard, do you think there's a variation in David's 128 cam calculation that works for the LS? I have an LQ9 317, want to boost on high compression E85. And you're going to go with the that camshaft formula to work on your turbocharged LQ9? You can try that. That's not how I would pick the cam because I have hundreds of dyno tests and I know which one I would pick, but I would look at it differently. There's no optimum cam for that. I know that everybody wants a formula for that, but there's not an optimum cam for that. There are literally hundreds of cams that you could pick for your turbo LQ9 that will make the same power because your turbo is going to dictate the power, not the camshaft. Camshaft will help dictate your NA power, and then where your power is going to be with whatever turbo you have, what boost that's going to occur at. I don't know what compression you have, high compression E85. So you have good gas, you're running high compression. I don't know what intake you're running. I don't know what RPM you want to run. I don't know what turbo you're running. I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make. But you could make it with lots of different camshafts. Eric, I don't know what you mean by thoughts. I may get a PC rubber. Okay. Man, I don't know what's going on. When I click down a little bit, it like goes down like 100 things. Richard, have you ever thought about doing videos with the guys from Donut Media? I would. I like Donut Media. It's one of the things I subscribe to. I just wish I knew where they got all of their B-roll stuff. I'm not exactly too sure what's happening, but all the rocker arms are torqued to 22 foot-pounds, and they're moving side to side as they should, whereas this single rocker arm has... So is this a rocker arm, or is it a lifter? Mike, your LSXR is not too big. It will make more power than your truck does. Your Trailblazer SS is fine though for that combination, unless you have a really big camshaft. Oh, Truck Norris, yeah, you're fine. You're not going to get too much of a gain from a LSXR on that combination. Maybe 15 horsepower probably. Aaron, I don't have any idea on your question. I took the rocker arm off and tried to push the pushrod down, and it's not springing. All the other ones are springing. When I spin the motor, the pushrods go up and down, but the lifter is stuck. So if you rotate the motor, does that, without the rocker on it, does that pushrod go up and down? Is the cam moving that pushrod? I mean, is the cam moving the lifter and the lifter moving the pushrod? Let me re-ask the question. Do you have the part manufacturer for the headers, cam, and springs you use on the 5.9 junkyard motor that you put together? I don't.
I have the cam, which I gave already, but I don't know about the springs though. Because the heads that I did the test on already had springs on it because it belongs to the guys at West Tech. I have a completely stock Silverado, wanting to put a cheap turbo on it. What do you think about turbo only? I think it's a good idea. I have lots of videos up where we turbocharge just stock motors without putting cams or springs or anything on them. Just put a turbo on the stock stuff, and it works good. It just takes the NA power curve that's there, whatever that is stock, and just elevates it up. One thing a 4.8 needs is a lot more torque, and a turbo will do exactly that. Damien, the 243 heads will be better than the 823 heads in the lower part of the curve, like probably up to 3,500 to maybe 4,000. But the 823 heads are going to be better after that. I've checked it. It's all the same. Problem is that the lifter itself isn't springing. So you should not be able to push the lifter down after it's filled with oil. If it has full oil pressure in it, a lot of times you can't push the lifter down at all. Some of them you can, some of them you can't, which drives me nuts on a hydraulic roller setup. I want them all to be the same. If they all have a little bit of a give to them, that's okay. I just want them all to be the same. But that doesn't happen. Some of them get pumped up so much that you can't push them down at all. But when you tighten the rocker down, it should you should have some preload. Richard, you've seen 320 CFM on stock LS heads. No, I've seen his question before, if this is the answer to that, is what does a stock LS3 head flow? And we got 315 on a stock LS3 head. If a little boost makes it fast, a lot of boost makes it faster. That's true. That's simple math, right? Is a 90 millimeter throttle body and BBK intake good for 500 horsepower LS, or do I need to go bigger? A 90 millimeter throttle body is more than enough to support 500 horsepower. But a BBK intake would not be the one that I would pick for that LS1. Take a look at the Cathedral Port video, the intake video that I have up, where I tested a bunch of different intake manifolds, and then you should pick the one that's going to help you make that power. My original for the G body build was a turbo, but the process seems more troublesome than the blower. So you put a blower on it. Some people want to do that. At what lift did it flow? That was probably 600, I'm thinking. I could look the data up. I could get that to you tomorrow, I think maybe during the live feed, and see. What is this? That's a 706 head. It has peak, that has actually peak flow at 650. I have lots of airflow data handy here. Some, not a lot, but I have some. I'll have to dig through this and see, but I think it probably was 600 or 650, I'm guessing. LT1 aluminum head, 799. 241. 317. Are we getting close? Are we getting close? No, I don't see it. I'll have to look. I'll have to look. Can you suggest a single plane MPI intake manifold for a 5.9 Magnum? Do they make one for that? The single plane Mopar performance intake manifolds are not great. If the one that we've run, I've run one on the Hemi a few times. If that's any indication, it just loses. I mean, it can make power at the top, but it loses so much power down low. There's only one Mopar M1 intake manifold, and I don't think it's cheap either. I think it's pretty pricey. How much boost would you run on a stock 292 inline 6-cylinder? I think I would do 7 pounds or something. There's a Vortec 4200. That one you could run more on, but it's going to make a lot more power than the 292 does. Well, Camaro, why does the turbo cost more if you put it on a car? I don't understand. Richard, adding a 177 supercharger to a 454. Was running a 780 Holly NA. Was thinking about running an 850. Then an 850 is more than enough for that supercharger. Dan said the 42s, 4200s, like the Camaro Barras, used to break head bolts and stick valves in the guides. I can attest to the breaking head bolts, although that wasn't them. That was that was me taking them off. That's when I saw for sale was $700 for the 5.9 Grand Cherokee page. Yeah, the Mopar performance intake manifolds are not cheap. How's our poll doing? Would you spend $1,200 for a fast LSXR intake if you got an extra 40 horsepower? 61% saying no, and 49% or 39% saying yes. Wisconsin's in the house. If I had a Comp 469 cam, but with lower lift, 525 or 550, what springs do I use? You just need a spring that has that will work with that lift. But a 469 cam is going to run some RPM. So what valves do you have and what intake do you have and all that? I think you're still going to need some spring rate. A 5.3, I want to build a 383 and run an old school Roots blower. I have a video up on that. What heads would you recommend? Well, how much power do you want to make? First of all, if you just want the blower on there and want it to look cool, you could port the stock heads that are there, or there are literally dozens of good ported heads that you could put on there. Grenaded my transfer case today in the turbo square body on the highway, of course, at 20 pounds, triple digits. That's not a good time for it to go. We've seen a guy on YouTube mounting an electric motor on a Vortec supercharger. It's supposed to be a heavy-duty electric motor. It would have to be. It'd have to be a lot to spin a Vortec that is making any like airflow and power. I voted yes, but I think I'd rather see boost. I think that's the problem, is that we like in the case of the LS, we put a cam and springs in and we get pretty big power gains. And then the next thing that we buy is more expensive and we get less of a gain. That's not the case with boost. If you buy boost, if you get a turbo and put it on there, you're going to get really big power gains, both as an actual number and as a percentage. It blew up all over the freeway. Not much left on the truck. Uh-oh. Is the truck destroyed too? Richard, what horsepower numbers or when should I upgrade from a 950 to a 1050? The 1050 I think about doing in the 600 horsepower range. But the other good thing about the 1050 is I don't think about just carb size. Is going from a 4150 to a Dominator usually means you also get a better intake manifold, because the Dominator flanged intake manifolds tend to make more power. They did on the LS, they did on the big block. How much horsepower does it take to run a centrifugal supercharger at 20 pounds of boost? Well, and it depends. I mean, is it 20 pounds of boost at 700 horsepower? Or is it 20 pounds of boost at 1500 horsepower? It's a lot. It's going to be a couple hundred horsepower. So a couple hundred horsepower electric motors are going to be pretty big. I just ordered a 125cc engine for my Trail 70 frame yesterday. I like those Trail 70s. Magic. So 462 valve question. Would a fully built bottom end, so you have a stock block, but forged crank, forged rods, and forged pistons, stock heads, stock cam, and a Vortec V3 be safe enough to turn up boost later on? Yes, you can actually run, if you make sure you put ring gap in it. If you put ring gap in it, you can do that on a stock motor. But I would highly recommend putting cams in it, because the thing that's going to happen is the boost is going to come down, the power is going to come up. You're going to like it a lot better. But yeah, you can run boost on it. Just run boost on a stock one with ring gap, but make sure that one has ring gap too. Richard, does your shop ever do dyno days? I don't have a shop, so I don't do any of that. Our 150 horsepower traction motors at work weigh 1,200 pounds. For reference, continuously rated. Yeah, they're rated for continuous 150 horsepower. Boosted, lucky, got gapped by a Tesla plaid. When did he race one? Yeah, Boo. So you're running the Buick, or have already run the Buick? And do they make a Dominator intake manifold for that? I got 12-inch wheels and tubeless tires on it. Oh, on the 70, that's cool. If you have a 455 Buick that's making 600 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds, that seems like it's doing pretty good. But it is cool to have a that's good prep to have another carburetor that you're going to the dyno with. What power level would you suggest oversized head bolts? I haven't ever run oversized head bolts on anything. I haven't put half-inch head studs or anything on an LS ever. I've only used 7/16 stuff. I did use the CA625 stuff on the last Big Bang motor that went 1540. But quite honestly, in that case, the deck thickness on the head is probably Oh no, that one had trick flow heads on it. The one before that had 317 or TEA, total engine airflow, ported 317. So it didn't have enough deck thickness to worry about more head bolt. Takes a few minutes to get into plaid mode. Would you take the time to convert an NA carburetor to a boost carb with a draw-through power valve, or buy a ready-to-race carburetor or supercharger carburetor? For me, it's easy because Westech has all of that, so I just put that on. I've never done a conversion on a carburetor to a blow-through. I don't think it's very hard. I mean, I don't think it's beyond me, but I just have never tried it. We can download Richard's experience and knowledge into USB and upload it. There wouldn't be very much there. There'd be lots of stuff about lizards and snakes and esoteric, like movie and pop culture references. Keep on the fluids, just need to find time for other things. Saw Tesla broken down. Did he have the hood open? Better build. You're gonna have to go on to something else. You need a boost reference power valve. The CSU carburetors had that. Theirs was adjustable, which was nice. But I'm wondering what they did to I kind of would like to see I'd like to see one of the new Edelbrocks done like that. And just like that. Minoki for the Truck Norris Cam, 55-pound injectors, Jeep Wrangler, Chevron 85 or 91. Is it a stock LQ9? Any real drawback to the ethanol? Yeah, it's hard. It can be hard on your pump and fuel system if it's not set up for that. Also, your mileage is not as good. The E85 is less expensive, so you have to figure out if that is actual and net zero. Probably is not. But on a naturally aspirated one, I don't know that you're going to see much of a gain. Do you need a boost reference power valve if the whole carb's in a box? You don't really. If the whole thing is sealed like Vortec does, or Paxton, then a regular carburetor actually works. If I send you an EFI modified performer RPM for a 351, could you run it at Westech versus a carburetor? Is it port injected? If it's port injected, we already know what's going to happen. I've already done that test. You don't have to do it on a dual plane. You can do it on a single plane, which we've done a lot. I'm going to try to do a blow through on my twin charge project. The Edelbrocks are set up for draw through on the supercharger now. E85 is less than C16. It definitely is less than that. Race fuel's really expensive now. $130 a can. See, now I don't feel so bad about nitromethane being 300 or 400. Running a ported single plane. So if you run a Dominator, are you going to run an adapter to it, or are you just going to put a 1050 4150? Because they make those too. I like the 4500 intake manifolds. I think there's something about the thing being wider. I know when we did the LS3 intake test that that intake manifold, even with a 4150, did better than the 4150 intake manifold did. So you have a 5.3 flat tops, a 224 cam, fast intake manifold. Are the 862 heads stock? .580 stock heads are going to hold it back. I'm thinking 460 or something like that. VP makes E85 in 5-gallon cans. We've run some of that stuff before because they mix it with race fuel instead of just regular pump gas, and it is good. And the E85 is more consistent. But we don't. What we're doing, that's not as much of a concern. I think they're hand ported very lightly. So if you look at the videos I have up on the 5.3 with a 224 cam, but we had a fast intake manifold and really good heads on it, either ported 706 heads or TrickFlow 205 heads. And that's more like 475, 485, something like that. Picked up a Dominator with a choke tower on it. I've never seen that. Richard, have you done a 4150 with a 4500 adapter carb compression? I'm sure that's got to be comparison, right? I think ultimately the 4150 opening in that is going to be better. But when I did my Engine Masters entry, I ran a 4150 intake. In fact, I ran an RPM air gap that we had done lots and lots of work to. And then we had an adapter, but I ran a 750 Dominator on it. And it worked really well. Ran E15, yeah. Uh, 13. I don't even know who that is. I have two sons. They're both at home. Well, they're not at home right now. One of them is. My old boss used to buy pallets of nitro and 55-gallon drums. I never asked the price. Yeah, I'm sure that would be a lot. I thought that Cletus said that the 55-gallon drum or the 5-gallon pail of nitromethane was, I don't know, $300 or $400 or something. It seems like a lot. I mean, it seems like a lot more than I mean, the 5-gallon thing is enough. A 55-gallon drum would be a lot. .383 in a Vega wagon. That'd be cool. I like the Vegas. 2 more minutes. I'm running a ported LSA 2.4 upper, a 9-inch lower pulley. L3 forged bottom end pistons. Smetting 260 11-degree heads. I don't know what those are. With a she's gone cam, 85 with an air cord shoulder. Yeah, I'm not familiar with a few of those things. Bob, I have no idea. I don't know what that cam is. I don't know what those heads are. I don't know how much boost that pulley combination is running. Having never run an LSA, I don't know who ported it. I don't know any of that. Next effort, small buck guys on YouTube are all using 4500s. Do the LSA heads flow much differently than the stock L3 heads? I'd have to ask Brian about that. I think that he's flowed LSA heads. I don't think I've ever flowed any, so I don't know what the difference would be. I have not seen the test of an EFI dual plane compared to a carb. I know about charge cooling with a carb, but I wonder about making all the turns with wet air and a dual plane. Nothing will change. It's exactly the same. If you have port injection down at the base, you're not getting any charge cooling. So the single plane, dual plane is just going to be a function of where the thing is making power. But one of them is going to have charge cooling and one of them is not going to have charge cooling. Thinking about getting them instead of L3 heads. Yeah, I just don't know. I remember Brian talked to me about the difference between them, but I don't ever remember seeing any actual airflow or even, and more importantly, if we did see airflow differences or something, I don't know how that translated to stuff on the dyno because I haven't directly compared those two heads. I was lucky to have LS3 heads or LY6 heads to test. We're going to go ahead and take our poll off at 62% saying no. It is a lot. And of the three things of the camshaft and the cylinder heads, the intake manifold probably adds the least amount of power. And a camshaft adds the most power, and it's also the least expensive. The cylinder heads are probably the most expensive. Wilson tells me a ported EFI Performer RPM will make 25 more horsepower and torque than a regular RPM. Those guys know a thing or two about airflow. 25 seems like a lot. I wonder what kind of combination they tested that on. So yours will be the last one. So one of your videos on generic sheet metal intake manifolds, like the sniperish kind of things, took note about the swelling. They do move around a lot. But when they did the super sniper, they got rid of some of that because they use thicker stuff. Do the composite plastic LS intakes share this characteristic? No, they don't. None of the factory ones do that, and the fast one doesn't do that either. And on that note, it is time to go. Welcome back, Dan. And I will see you guys all tomorrow. Near.